What's going on, everybody? Good late afternoon. We are here on Friday, and in 2 days, the Seattle Seahawks season is going to come to an end, regardless of how the game goes on Sunday. Sunday will be the last game of the season for the Seahawks, and that means that we are just 3 days away from Black Monday, and it could be a Black Monday that the Seahawks are involved in. You don't participate in Black Monday if you make the playoffs, but if you don't, well, stuff can happen. So we got to have a little bit of a conversation here because there are some decisions that need to be made, and I think the Seahawks need to participate on Black Monday to an extent. Obviously, you're not going to get rid of Mike Macdonald. That'd be crazy. He had a good year. He's a good coach. Happy with what we see so far. And you're not going to do anything, I don't think, with Aiden Durd. I mean, maybe Aiden Durd gets a promotion or something. Maybe somebody decides to hire him as a head coach. I doubt it. Not right now. Not enough has happened yet. Guys like Leslie Frazier, you're happy to have them around. A lot of the assistants, a lot of the positional coaches, you're probably pretty okay with right now. So you've got a lot of stuff with the Seahawks coaching staff that I'm at least cool with, and I don't think anybody's really calling to burn those areas of the team down. But there are two things that I think should happen on Black Monday, or maybe in the day or two after Black Monday. Because sometimes you do see moves get made on Tuesday or Wednesday, but the further you get away from Black Monday, the further the less likely it becomes. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say this stuff now. I don't want to have to wait until after the game is played and then maybe have this stuff happen before I can even talk about it. So I'm gonna say my piece now. Not calling for McDonald, not calling for Durd, not calling for Leslie Frazier, not calling for any of them. I will say there are going to be some positional coaches that could be let go because the guy ahead of them gets let go, but so be it. So I'm going to keep it simple. Two guys. Ryan Grubb needs to go. Jay Harbaugh needs to go. Those two guys need to not be here for the 2025 Seahawks. I don't believe that either of those guys are going to be able to maximize the talent and the opportunity that we give them in 2025. I just don't. And if 2025 is going to be kind of a go for it year, or at least a partial go for it year, I need better people in those two positions: offensive coordinator, play caller, and special teams coach. So let's start with Ryan Grubb because that's the big one, right? Like special teams, you could make an argument that special teams in this league are pretty random. There's a lot of variance, and maybe it's not even the coach's fault. I tend to not really agree with that, but let's start with Ryan Grubb because that's the much more impactful one. So let's just start at the baseline. Let's just start with the baseline top level numbers. So when Ryan Grubb was brought in, he was billed as somebody who would be able to fix things immediately and take the offense to a very high level compared to where they had been in the previous year. And you take a look at it on the most basic of levels, just to keep it simple: points per game. Last year, the Seahawks, 21.4 points per game, which was actually 17th in the league. This year, 2024 Seahawks, 21.6 points per game. So basically identical, and they've moved down a couple of spots in the ranking, 19th. Now, this last game, they have a chance to move up or maybe move down, but it's not necessarily going to impact anything, right? Like, especially if the Rams are emptying out the benches, I don't think them scoring 60 points this Sunday is going to really move us, right? So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about an increase of zero point 0.2 points per game, completely insignificant, and a decrease in rank. So, the league as a whole scored more points in 2024, and the Seahawks scored about the same amount compared to last year. And remember, a lot of our points are non-offensive. We have quite a few defensive touchdowns, and we have a special teams touchdown this year. We didn't have as many last year, right? Last year we had what, maybe one or two defensive touchdowns, non-offensive touchdowns. This year I think we have four. So I I don't see any improvement here. And it gets worse if you drill in. Like if you go to rbsdm.com and you take a look at EPA per play, the 2023 Seattle Seahawks, for as much as they were not a great offense, were 10th in EPA per play. You heard me right. 10th in EPA per play. They ranked in the top 10 in EPA per play. They were one of 13 teams that had a positive EPA per play. They ranked ahead of Kansas City and just a little bit behind the Sean McVay Rams. So there were actually some really good things about the offense. It just wasn't resulting in enough points. This year, the EPA per play for the Seahawks is all the way down at 20th, not even in the top half. Negative EPA per play by a pretty decent margin. So even if you want to pull around a little bit with the analytics, things have gotten much worse in my estimation. So not only did Ryan Grubb not come in and immediately fix our problems, I think that at this point it's become impossible to argue that the offense has gotten worse. So as of with the evidence we have in front of us in terms of result, like just taking result, Shane Waldron was better than Ryan Grubb has been. And it's not just the results, because the results could be misleading potentially, right? The results could be thrown off by personnel. But I think if you do a one-to-one comparison of the personnel from last year to this year, I don't think you're going to find that Ryan Grubb was hamstrung in comparison to Waldron. Remember, last year, the Seahawks only had Abe Lucas for like 3 games the whole year, right? They had Abe Lucas for about 3 games the whole year. This year, at least he's played about close to half the season. He's going to end up playing about 7 games. Charles Cross missed time and played hurt for a decent chunk of the season. And you had basically the same receivers, with JSN being a much more impactful player this year. Now, some of that is because of Grubb, but JSN was 21 years old last year. Now he's 22. He's clearly improved individually as well. So I'm not buying that that's justification to keep Ryan Grubb around for another year. I think that I think that when you look at something like that, you have to say that, hey, if anything, Grubb had better stuff to work with, right? The tight end room was probably more or less equivalent. The running back room was probably more or less equivalent. Ken Walker did miss a decent amount of time in 2024, but guess what? When he was healthy, you barely used him. So why should I even care about that? So I don't think there was some big difference in the level of talent that he had to work with. He just did less with it. But it's more than just the end result as well. There's this Robert Mays tweet from last week that I want to highlight here, where he's talking about how everything in the Seahawks offense is being put on Geno Smith's shoulders, but it also highlights how poorly constructed this offense is. As of, like, what would that be? 8 days ago, before the Thursday night football game. So it's maybe a slightly different now, but it's not going to be radically different. The Seattle Seahawks offense ranked 29th in running back carries. So bottom 4 in giving the ball to your running back as a running play. 31st in play action rate. So bottom 2 in utilizing play action. 32nd in quick pressures allowed, which maybe that's on the offensive line, but it does highlight how futile this offense has been and how bad an idea it probably is to pass the ball at our rate. And we live in shotgun more than any other team in the league. So he built an offense with a quarterback who's not one of the top 5 best quarterbacks in the league. This is not Joe Burrow. Maybe this is okay if your quarterback is Joe Burrow or somebody like that. But the whole offense is Geno Smith dropping back in shotgun without play action, without a good offensive line in front of him. So that's just a dumb way to build your offense. Even if the results were somehow magically good, I'd still say this is not sustainable. But if it were good, I would say, wow, we have a really amazing quarterback. We got a future Hall of Fame quarterback. That's the only reason why this works. Nothing to do with the OC. But I look at this stuff and I go that objectively, this is a poor way to build an offense. We gave Ryan Grubb 2 second-round picks at running back. We gave him good wide receivers and good tight ends. We gave him some good stuff to work with here and some reason to believe that it could work because you looked at what Waldron did. It was a lot better, and Waldron is supposedly bad. And this is what he builds. No misdirection, no trickery. You don't even use play action. Like, how can you not be using play action in the modern NFL? How can you think that's a good idea? Like, I understand that some people are going to say, well, it's because we can't run the ball, so play action doesn't work. Well, then build a running game. Figure out a way to run the ball. And that's kind of goes back to the original argument, right? Ryan Grubb doesn't like running the ball, even when it's working. I know earlier in the season, running the ball wasn't working that well, so you abandoned it. Guess what? You got to later in the season, the running game was working pretty decently well, and you still abandoned it in favor of building an offense that is completely constructed out of shotgun dropbacks. 3-step, 5-step, 7-step drop. There's very little quick game in this offense. And that's not even getting into the passing concepts. The passing concepts are horrific. Like, go back and look at the Geno Smith red zone interception against the Green Bay Packers. You got 3 Seahawks receivers in the same area of the field in the red zone on 3rd and 9. Like, it looks like that play's going to work, but there are a bunch of Green Bay defenders right there. So when one guy gets beat, the other guy just drops back and makes the play because he's got his guy in that area too. Why are you putting all these Seahawks receivers in the same spot? How does that make sense? And you see stuff like that week after week after week after week. So, Ryan Grubb, it was a good try. I'm not here to say it was a bad hire. I thought it was a good idea, but I was aware that it could go wrong. It has gone wrong. The guy is failing on the most fundamental level to me as an OC. This isn't like Waldron that first year where the results were not good, but I felt like his process wasn't that bad. He just needed better players or players that suited his system or whatever. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how offensive football works. So go out, get somebody else. I want something that isn't Ryan Grubb. The fact that he thinks this is how you coach in the NFL, maybe he'll learn, but he needs to learn somewhere else. He's probably not going to learn right now. He's probably not going to learn after just 1 year. I don't have time for him to learn. You want time, by the magazine. And then we have Jay Harbaugh. I'm going to get to him for just a couple of minutes here because, look, special teams are not nearly as impactful as offense, but special teams can be impactful. Special teams did everything they could to try to hand a football game to the New York Jets earlier this year, which would have ended our season much earlier than it was. And the rest of the team was able to save him. But I think that game alone is pretty disqualifying. But then you've got other games, like you've got that game against the Giants where the game-tying field goal with less than a minute left gets blocked. You look at some of these other moments where you're employing D. Williams, and look, maybe that's a John Schneider thing, maybe that's a Mike McDonald thing, maybe you blame somebody else for that. But I I don't know how you can continue to stick it out with that guy when he wasn't even great in college. That's the weird thing about this. Like, I remember that Michigan team that won the national title last year. If they had a weakness, it was probably special teams. Like, that special teams tried to give the game away against Alabama in the playoff. So he wasn't even good there. I'm not surprised that he's not really that good here. If you go to the DVOA rankings for special teams, which is probably the best way we have right now of measuring overall special teams impact, and you sort by special teams DVOA, I know you can't look at the numbers, they're behind a paywall, but Seattle ranks 22nd in the league in special teams, according to this. They are 22nd out of 32 teams, so well below average. And some people might say, well, we haven't given him a chance to get his special team studs on the team yet. And that might be true, but let's also remember we have one of the highest paid kickers and one of the highest paid punters in the league, and both those guys were good. So that's giving you a head start right there. If you can't make something happen with that head start, then I don't need you. So if you're being gifted a really, and by the way, both those guys have been really good this year, Myers and Dixon. So if you can't make it cook with those two guys giving you that head start, then I don't think you're very good, and I want to do something else. Because again, if 2025 is going to be even a semi go for it year, then I want somebody that is more likely to be able to figure it out. Go get somebody who's done it before. Go get somebody with experience. Just don't do this Harbaugh thing. All right. I'm going to go and get out of here now, but those are the two things I want to see happen on Black Monday. Get those two guys out. Bring in two guys who have done this before. Bring in two guys that come from a better tree. Give me somebody who comes from a tree that has been very productive lately. There are a lot of options. I'm not even going to get into that right now, but you can do better than this. Do better than this. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks. Stream later tonight.